YouTube! What the crap's going on? Heir of Carthage back, and I think I'm finally over the plague of patchy, whatever that means. I was sick, had some kind of cold. It was annoying, but I'm definitely feeling better. Hopefully a little more like myself, and a little less like death itself. So today it's going to be a lot of faction focus, as I say today, until we get it done. There's going to be a lot of faction focuses because I want to get it done. And then also I'm going to try and get that last beginner's guide in, at least one more that kind of covers the basics of campaign. So once I get to that point, I'll feel like I at least left something in, for Rome 2 players who aren't going to switch to Attila right away. Maybe you got Rome 2 over the holidays, maybe you bought it recently on sale, that you've got something here on my channel that you can watch to kind of get you into it. People are going to continue to play Rome 2. Though, I mean, obviously a lot of people will start to play Attila. Heir, does that mean you're never going to play Rome 2 again? Of course I'm going to play Rome 2 again. But y'all know how it goes, right? When a new game's out, I'm trying to show you that game, and if you're interested in it, I'm going to keep showing it to you. Now, it's not to say that there's not interest in other Total War games on my channel, because there is, but it seems like people are really enjoying the Rome 2 videos right now, so that's what I'm making. If we get into Attila and I start to show you a bunch of stuff, and people just really want something else, it'll make itself apparent, and we'll show something different. We'll just kind of work with it. But when the game first comes out, obviously I want to show you it as much as possible so that you can see the game, determine whether you like it, determine whether it's something that you want to get, and hopefully I can do a good job showing you what the game's like. That's obviously something that I look forward to doing. Plus it'll give me a chance to get to know it. In any case, I'm excited. Today is the Getae, or Getae, or however it's pronounced. I do not know. Getae is usually what I call them. These guys are a fun faction. They really are. They've been interesting for me ever since they were added. But right now, they're one of those factions it's not horrible, but they're not great. They're kind of somewhere in between. But they have a lot of really fun units. And I think that's one of the things I like the most about the Getae. It's like, even if that unit is not the most practical one, it's fun, and I enjoy using it. So we'll just kind of run through who the Getae are, what they're good at, and what their units are, and then of course I'll show you a battle where I use them. It's actually a pretty fun battle if I remember right. So let's get into it with the general's units. They have noble spears. Any high tier barbarian spear unit is going to have very sturdy melee defense, and these guys deliver on that. They're going to have good armor, good shield, melee, health, not melee, good health, morale. And of course they're going to come with cavalry counter tactics, and these guys also have expert charge defense, which a lot do, and shield wall. So a very defensively capable unit, and also a very dangerous unit to cavalry. Now that said, it's usually going to be interesting with a unit like this in the sense that you're never going to want to use them against mid-tier swords. That's going to be a disaster. And it's just because spears are really not meant to face off against swords. These guys are not like hoplites. They do have very good weapon damage and so melee attack for a spear unit, but very good weapon damage for a spear, and a very nice charge bonus for a spear as well. So again, do not get these guys involved with mid-tier swords because it's not going to be good for them. But again, don't get me wrong either. This is a strong infantry unit. It's a very heavy spear infantry with a 32 charge bonus. They're gonna do some damage on the charge. But again, beware of sword units. I find this unit to not be probably a very frequent pick for you when you're going to be playing as the Getae. Maybe in campaign it's something fun for you to take, because again, as they get upgraded over time, it'll be a potentially good unit. But when it comes to multiplayer battles, you'd want to bring this spear general when you're not worried about your enemy's infantry having a lot of killing power, and potentially if you're facing a lot of cavalry. That might be the only time where you really want to bring this particular general. So, next one, noble swords. This guy's kind of the opposite. The noble sword is a very tanky sword unit. Is it as good as Oathsworn? No. Not quite, and I think it's mainly the attack, but let's take a look just to understand what the key differences are. It's not as good as Oathsworn, though, I know that much. 48, 45, 35, 69, 43, 45, so the Oathsworn has better melee defense. It also has better melee attack right off the bat. And then the charge bonus is just meagerly better on the noble sword. Not much to make a whole lot of a difference. Let's see, 80, 65, 70. Let's check those last stats. 80, 65, 70. Yeah, so it's the attack that's going to do you in. Again, and then that little bit of extra defense will make a difference. So that difference in attack, I think it's 5 attack and the 2 defense, is what makes them different. So obviously not a ton different. If you're able to do some missile damage to the Oathsworn first, if you're able to interrupt their charge with another unit, again, it becomes possible. And these guys are a little cheaper too. So definitely a tanky sword unit though, and a potential threat to any formation attack type sword unit because of this is a massive charge. So definitely a viable option for a general, and definitely something you're going to see people using pretty frequently. Now, noble horsemen are a very strong, very heavy shock cav. They are pretty expensive, as would be expected for this type of unit, but they can deliver some pretty punishing damage. They do not have the 76 charge bonus like you would see on, say, like Companion. I think it's 76. Double check that real quick, just to make sure I'm telling you right. Sorry, I'm spending a little time doing this. Just want to make sure I give you the right. I mean, obviously I make mistakes, but give you close to right information. Yeah, so 76. But you'll also notice that they had a much higher melee attack at 53 on the noble horse. So yes, very high melee attack here. The same weapon damage you're going to see on pretty much all shock cav. Their charge is a little lower. You know, melee defense is pretty much what we'd come to expect. Armor is at 60. Let's compare that here. Yeah, with 70, say, on like a companion cav, so maybe a little less armor. Morale was 70 on, say, like the companion cav as well. Yeah, 70 there. So a comparable unit, you're going to trade a little bit of charge for more attack, which is honestly not a bad thing. That melee attack can be pretty helpful if they have to get drawn out into melee for a moment. So yeah, a potentially devastating unit in the late game for charging depleted units, and just wrecking any unbraced unit for that matter. And they're also going to be pretty darn good against most cavalry. You wouldn't want to get them engaged with heavy melee cav like Bactrian nobles, or I mean, if they got a good charge, they could probably beat a cav like that, but it would be a tough victory for them and not something you'd want to do. Keep them away from heavy and very heavy melee cav. Other than that, they should do pretty darn good in a cavalry engagement. But yeah, a good choice if you're looking for a mobile general. And obviously these guys give the Getae some punching power when it comes to hammer and anvil charges. Now, Folksmen are an interesting unit. All Falks and Romphia units get a bonus versus large, which is not seen in the statistics here. It's hidden. There is like, I think it's honga.net, honga.net you can go to, and it'll show you all of those hidden stats and stuff as well. But Folksmen, I believe, have a hidden bonus of, I want to say 10 versus cav, and the Romphia units, I want to say, have a hidden 15 versus cav, and maybe higher. I can't remember, but I know that there's a hidden bonus there. I should have looked before I came on here. I apologize. But so here's the thing with Folksmen, though, and take very quick notice of this. No melee defense and pretty much no armor. So these guys are not going to like being charged by cavalry. Now that said, if the cavalry does not get an appropriate charge, these guys have a large charge bonus along with that hidden bonus versus cav, which is going to give them a pretty strong attack versus cavalry. But again, do not forget, low health, armor, morale, melee defense, they're not going to like getting charged. Usually what you're going to see Folksmen used for is meat shield units. They can cause quite a bit of damage if they get a decent charge because of this 48 charge bonus. They're not going to really cause a lot of impact damage because they're medium melee infantry, which is pretty light in the world of infantry. So again, they're not going to have a lot of knockdown power, but you're going to definitely see them able to cause some damage on the charge if used right. Mercenary Axe Warriors were a huge addition in my mind for the Getae. The nice thing here is that it gives you something in between these low armor, you know, YOLO Folksmen and these really tanky noble swords. It kind of gives you something to put in between them from a melee infantry standpoint. And Mercenary Axe Warriors that get a shield or like a charge shield from Folksmen can be potentially useful against high value, high armor targets. They don't have real high attack, but the nice steady injection of armor piercing damage that these guys can deal to units, as you can see there, they have that 10 armor piercing, which just avoids all armor. So over time that can add up and cause a lot of damage, so a very handy unit. And of course we've already discussed the noble swords and what their usefulness is. Now there's quite a few spear infantry offerings for the Getae, and we're going to talk through these. In fact, I think the best way to talk through these would be to actually go to the battlefield. Let's do that. Noble spear. I don't need two of the noble spears. We got armored spear. Okay, yep. So let's go to the battlefield. We need a Macedonian. We'll make them the defender and give them a single unit here. All right. So let's go out onto the battle map and look at these spear units and see what each of them could potentially be useful for. This is going to be the easiest way to show this, because there's a couple of key things that I want to point out to you. I need to turn off like all the rain and stuff or whatever. I guess at least it'll level set. Look pretty cool. Okay. So let's start the battle so we can take a look at these units. First of all, the noble spears. Here they are. I guess you get to see what they look like on the battle map. Pretty darn beastly. You're going to see something right away with all of these Getae spear units that it's very interesting to note. None of them have Precursor Javelins. And this is a huge setback. Huge setback for the Getae. And it's something you need to be aware of. None of these spears are able to throw javelins like Levy Freeman, all the way from the cheap to the expensive. And that's a big deal. Now, that aside, let's take a look at some of these. So just straight up spears here. These guys are very weak, obviously, with a solid bonus versus large. They can be useful if you can get them into a fight without being charged. Otherwise, they're not going to do you a whole lot of good. Again, they can't toss javelins. Spear warriors, you know, these guys do not have cavalry counter tactics, so remember that as well. It looks like slightly better attack and stats in general than the spears, and obviously they're going to come at a slightly increased price. We'll look at that in a moment. Heavy spears is the first unit where you're going to get your cavalry counter tactics. Now, a good way to use anything with cavalry counter tactics is to turn that on when you think, say, like a super heavy shot cav is going to be trying to retreat, and then all that extra bonus is applied to a retreating unit, and it can be very bad for them. Heavy spears obviously increase their attack, melee defense, all those stats get better, and then it's going to be the same thing moving into the armored spears. Armored spears, though, are not like crazy armored, but they have a pretty decent amount of armor, but again, that lack of javelins is going to be key. But because they have shield wall, which is now, heavy spears also have it, these two units with shield wall can use that functionality to hold out a little longer. So you do get a little bit of holding power and the ability to actually brace against, say, like a chariot charge or something like that. But not being able to throw javelins is big. And then, of course, with noble spears, you kind of get it all, right? You get shield wall, you get cavalry counter tactics, the elite spear damage, which should come with pretty decent armor. Well, actually, it's only 6 armor piercing. It's not that great. It's not like a hoplite. I'm probably thinking they have a different weapon type, would be my guess. But anyway, so something very important to note, obviously, about the Getae spears. I keep calling them Dacian spears. I guess these guys pretty much are Dacians, but anyway. So yeah, here's the prices of them. Spears obviously being attractive because they're cheap. Spear warriors probably not going to be sought after a whole lot just because it's just a very kind of mediocre increase. Heavy spears, obviously, where it starts to get serious with the cavalry counter tactics, and then armored spears having a lot more staying power with 65 melee defense, shield wall, 75 armor. So some holding power available to the Getae in their spear department. Now, this is where it gets fun, in my mind, with the Getae, and especially in campaign. I like using these units in multiplayer, but I really like kind of unique units like this in campaign, too. Sometimes I'll play a campaign just to get to use some of these fun units. I guess I'm weird like that. Maybe some of you are the same. But they have Dacian Bowmen, which are kind of a cool short-range bow. Not going to provide anything special, but they do provide bows for cheap, which can be very handy in certain scenarios because there's certain factions that can't provide bows for cheap. And that can just be nice, because bows, of course, deal out, even the cheap ones deal out a lot more damage than, say, the cheap slingers. But, of course, the cheap slingers have more ammo, but you see where I'm getting at with that. Dacian Skirmishers, nothing special here either, but, again, providing you with a cheap javelin unit, which is potentially good at warding off elephants and chariots. Now, Dacian Heavy Bowman is where this starts to get fun in my mind. So 150 range, only 35 missile damage, but still, you get a 150 range unit for 440, which is not bad. And it comes with 30 armor, which is also not bad. So these guys are going to do a little better in trying to defend themselves. They have decent melee attack and weapon damage. And yeah, just going to do a little better at defending themselves. Dacian heavy skirmishers. These guys have very nice weapon damage. Very nice weapon damage. Decent melee attack. I don't know how they really fare in melee, though, as I haven't tested them. 60 armor, though, is pretty respectable. 50 health is also decent. The 32 missile damage, though, is pretty underwhelming. And most people, you're going to see them go for these mercenary Thracian peltist, and for a good reason. Elite missile damage, combined with still very good weapon damage and melee attack. But if we look at the damage, you get 10 armor piercing off the mercenary Thracian peltist. That's like an axe coming off people, so that is great. And these guys can be so helpful. You saw me use them to deadly effect in the Athens campaign. I love the mercenary Thracian peltist, probably one of my favorite units in the game. Decent melee defense and a good 55 health here, not bad at all. Their armor is going to be pretty underwhelming for a peltist, though, but you trade that for this these stats and the elite missile damage, and very nice shots per minute as well. So these guys are general snipers, they're cavalry destroyers, they're chariot hunters. I mean, they can do a lot of things, and elephants will whittle or wither before them if they get used properly. So a very handy unit indeed. Love the Thracian peltist. We've talked about noble horsemen. Then they have access to spear horsemen, which are pretty crappy medium cav. Or, whoa, they actually call them heavy. Man, that's news to me. I had no idea. That explains a lot, though. It explains why when I played against the Getae as the RDA, why my Getae, or yeah, my RDA cav got wrecked. The light Illyrian cav got wrecked by these guys, even though the stats were a little better. So heavy is helpful in the sense that the impact damage is going to be a little greater on the charge, and then also, and if you want to know more about the impact damage, very interesting videos put up recently. I'm always calling it out to Maximus, but the guy continues to deliver some very interesting information. So his channel right now is pretty fascinating to me in that sense, that he really seems to dig out some interesting information. So if you're looking for that kind of in-depth information beyond just some of these beginner tips, he is definitely a good channel to stop by. And then, of course, there's a lot of other players, like, you know, you saw Pokapax and Attila the Great, and of course, Maximus and Blade Master and Milk and Cookies. All these guys like to kind of get on that competitive scene. So if you're looking for more of that stuff beyond what I do, those are the guys to go check out their channel. But in any case, we'll keep at it here. So, yeah, heavy cav, but their attack is very underwhelming. And, you know, nothing special anywhere else on these guys, but they are cheap. So that's going to be their one redeeming factor. Now, they do have access to bow horsemen, which is a huge key for the Getae. They have 40 missile damage, which is very nice. Only 125 range, of course, because they're not Amazonian riders. But, I mean, they do have heavy shot, which potentially makes these guys very helpful. A very nice tool for the Getae to have, though they cost a little more than, say, like a Scythian horse. But, again, a very nice tool for the Getae to have. Now, Mercenary Thracian Cav, it's kind of interesting. These guys aren't particularly good Jav Cav. They don't have the elite Javelin damage. But I mean, just kind of so-so stats in the realm of Jav Cav. But again, I kind of like these guys in campaign. They're kind of fun to use there because I want to say that Alexander used a few of these mercenary Thracian units in his army. It's just kind of a fun role-play kind of thing to go in and do, I guess, if you're a nerd like me. I do the same thing whenever I'm playing as Carthage, like using some of the same mercenaries that Hannibal might have used. Anyway, let's go check out a replay. That's all that there is to show as far as their units, and I have a fun replay here, if I can remember where it is. It's somewhere back here. Nope, right here it is. So yeah, it's going to be me facing Rome, which is a tough match for the Getae, but definitely a winnable match for the Getae. Your challenge is going to lie in the fact that Rome can potentially bring excellent mid-tier sword units like veteran legionaries and evocati, or just a huge horde of, say, like Principes or legionaries. Also, Rome doesn't, they can match your spear horse pretty well with Silky Equites, and they'll have the leftover money to pay the extra for the Silky Equites because you're going to pay so much more for your noble swords. Obviously, a few of the things that you can use against Rome, potentially Axe Warriors, can be very helpful if you screen them with another unit. Folksmen are cheap, and they act as a pretty good meat shield and can do a lot of damage to Hastati, though I don't know if they can win it. But again, the noble swords are going to be your weapon. And you'll see that I have 3 of them in my army, because I know that if I can maybe get 3 punch-throughs going with the noble swords, I might have a chance against Rome. So it's important to understand that noble swords do their damage on the charge, and the charge is going to make or break their performance versus Roman infantry. So if you fail to get a good charge with the noble swords, you may want to try and figure out how to pull them back and get that good charge. But let's take a look at my army real quick. We'll do an overview because it might be easier. Got heavy spears, heavy spears, heavy spears. So it looks like I got 4 heavy spears up front. These guys are probably meant to help just interrupt charges from the Roman infantry. I've got 3 noble swords, and I've probably got 4 mercenary axe warriors, be my guess. I do. I have 2 mercenary Thracian peltas to potentially deal with elephants in case the Roman brings them. I have, of course, one of my general sits in one of the noble swords, and then I have 4 spear horsemen. This is going to be a difficult win for me just because, again, pound for pound, Rome is able to bring more infantry, and it's really going to depend on what kind of army my opponent has brought. And so far I've seen very little from what he's brought. Over here he's got 2 auxiliary cav, which are honestly a pretty big threat because my spear horsemen are no match for them. I do have spears though if I can manage to peel them to the flank to help out with that fight. I think my opponent makes a big mistake here by bringing Triarii again rather than just spending more money on like Hastati meat shield units, because a few Hastati can make or break this battle because they can interrupt my charges quite well, and the Romans would definitely put me in a bad position at that point. And then I can see some Syrian archers, now along with some legionaries, so I don't know what else the Roman has at the moment. He ran those 2 legionary cav over here. Why did I not bring bow horse? Some of you might be asking. Well, I knew there was going to be some forest on the map, and I got to thinking about it, and it's, you know, what can I use the bow horse for? Well, I can pick away at the enemy cavalry. I can't really successfully skirmish with Balearic slingers or Syrian archers with the bow horse, not likely at least. So I didn't bring them because I didn't feel like they were going to add a whole lot of value for me here. I just brought the melee cav to hopefully potentially deal with enemy skirmishers rather than bringing bow horse, which costs 400 some odd talents each. Heir, why the heavy spears? Why'd you bring them? You don't need spears versus Rome. They have a lot more swords. Well, what else am I going to bring? You know, I bring the heavy spears. I might be able to trade almost all of them and get maybe 1.5 noble swords, but you can't buy 1.5. And then that leaves me with fewer units to deal with potential Roman meat shields, and that's really what I brought the heavy spears for, was to help slow down any enemy Roman meat shields. They have a decent charge bonus, better than what a Roman unit's going to have. Obviously they would get beat down by Hastati, and it's also there to hopefully ward off any YOLO charge from enemy cav. And these guys have decent shields and armor, so they can help lead my Folksmen, which I don't want to get shot to pieces. So you're seeing me pull back. I'm trying to lure the Roman away from this excellent, superior position. He's up on a hill compared to where I'm at. It's not like a massive hill, but it is uphill. And he's got a forest to skirmish from here, and that is not going to be good for me whatsoever. Plus the forest would slow down any potential charges for my men. I really need to try and get the Roman out here as much as possible, where my charges with my noble swords are gonna do the most good, because if you mouse over a forest, it's just something to be aware of. So remember, charges are dependent partly on speed, and if you mouse over a forest, it says speed 70%, so clearly your charge is not going to be as powerful in that scenario. So I'm going to be very patient here and just sit outside my opponent's range. I'm going to see him push up again. He really wants to skirmish with me, and why wouldn't he? And obviously it looks like at this point I'm getting impatient, and I'm just going to go engage the Roman. This is not a good decision on my part. All I needed to do is simply back away again, and the Roman would most likely have moved up to come after me. But instead I go ahead and push forward, and he is targeting my heavy spears, which I feel like is a mistake. He needs to snipe my general. He's got 3 auxiliary Syrian archers, and he could do some horrid damage to my general because I'm pushing him forward like this. Again, huge mistake on my part. Fortunately, my opponent has yet to capitalize on it. So, let's take a look at the infantry that comes out of the forest from him. Legionaries, looks like 4 of them up front. Kind of mixed with legionary cohort as well. 2 Triarii, way too many spears to come against the Getae, especially considering that he invested in auxiliary cav, in my opinion. So I pull my spears back kind of at the last second and instead replace them with Folksmen and axe warriors to pin down the Roman infantry. And then here again I make another big mistake. I have a charge order on this unit behind, but clearly my general is going to have a terrible charge through here, so massive idiot mistake with my general. Don't know what I was thinking or why. I obviously wasn't thinking. I am going to get a fair few kills in this legionary cohort, but it's just a dumb position to put my general in, because now he's right in the center of the battle. I do have noble swords bearing down on either flank. I'm just trying to hold for a while. And then I'm going to intercept this Roman legionary that already routed my Folksmen and get another nice charge on it with my heavy spears. And then later on I can go into shield wall if I need to try and last longer. Roman cavalry already making for my back lines. I'm going to intercept them with heavy spears and then try and maybe reinforce with cavalry. Over here, my cavalry is not engaged yet, and my opponent is intelligently going to charge my noble swords in the back with his auxiliary cav. That's a good move, and it's unfortunately going to work out pretty nice for him there. And I'm still not paying attention. I finally get a countercharge, but I do turn my Thracian Peltis around and get a very nice volley. I really need my Thracian Peltis to get around the flanks of the Roman army, but my center's cracking a lot faster than I wanted. One legionary is actually starting to waver, just because it got charged well by the Folksmen and then followed up with another good charge by the heavy spears, but now they're starting to turn that around a little. But I've already lost this Folksman, and I have to bring this noble sword back to charge in, and I'm starting to get breakthroughs in my line, and my men are starting to crumble under the tankiness of the Roman units. I'm going to come back here, ignore the Syrian archers, and start throwing mercenary Thracian Peltis volleys into the back of this legionary cohort that's not positioned right. And then I'm going to try and eventually get around and do the same thing over here. My opponent, though, is getting the better of me in multiple spots. So, like right here, I engaged his legionary cav, but then he's going to bypass me and go for rear charges, which I really don't need, because you can see my men are already faltering enough on their own, and really not faring too well right now against this onslaught of extremely good Roman infantry. So I made these mistakes. I left myself open for it. My general's getting sniped away, and not in a good position. So you can see he's only got 133 kills, which is not particularly great. And that just quick smack from the auxiliary cav routes my 2 units in the center, so battle's looking very bad for me at the moment. The Roman has a lot of units free. He's still got 3 Syrian archers. It is definitely not looking to be in my favor. I do have the Roman auxiliary cav pretty much dealt with for the time being. This one's going to win its fight handily, though. And my general's about to die, which is super bad. Not just died, he's shattered there with 48 men left, so really not getting my bang for the buck out of that noble sword unit. My opponent... no, that's my spear horsemen trying to extricate themselves from that fight. Or no, they routed. Yeah, they're shattered. Never mind. So they are extricating themselves from the fight, it's just not willfully. Now, and these noble swords are now getting ganged up on. This is a bad fight for them. They are going to get, decent kills, but they're also being fired at by Syrian archers. Those Syrian archers are a major problem, but this is an interesting mistake. My opponent charges in the woods into mercenary Thracian Peltis with his general's bodyguard. Remember, these Peltis have that armor-piercing damage, and they actually kill the Roman legatus, which is really going to help me here to keep my army from chain routing. I get a nice charge here with spear horsemen, knock over his legionaries, and now I can put some pressure on his archers, but then the Roman turns around and gets a fantastic pillar volley, so I go ahead and try and charge quickly into these legionary cohort. It's going to be almost no damage. And then I'm going to try and move through, but I didn't really knock him down, so that was kind of a mistake again on my part. I am kind of winning on this flank with the noble sword, but then the enemy cavs, along with some infantry, still managed to turn that around, so there's still Roman cavalry on the field. And I am desperately in a bid to destroy these Syrian archers, because if I cannot, they will destroy me. Fortunately, though, because the general's dead, it makes these rear attacks, because they are fleeing from me, it makes those rear attacks more punishing. And then over here, the Roman auxiliary cav with 32 men left actually starts to waver again because of the death of the general. So that was very timely. That general made a huge mistake in charging my Thracian Peltis. That's another reason why I feel like those units are pretty clutch. And all of a sudden, this battle that looked impossible for me is actually now looking pretty bright. So that's how, just little things like that can play big. My general had died. I was in the death throes, basically. And then the Roman general charged my Thracian Peltis and got mowed down. Not a good charge to make, because I'm pretty sure I got a javelin volley as he charged. And then my noble swords over here managed to tank it out, and I go into shield wall to just make sure they keep tanking it out, because then that puts them all the way up to 83. After you go into shield wall, make sure and click another attack order to make sure that you don't get the weird shield wall glitch. So the noble swords here definitely saved me. These guys have 150 kills basically to only 20 losses. So this unit was good. My general was completely wasted because you saw the moronic charge order I gave him. I should have just waited, and I should have stayed at a distance too, because even if I had just kind of stayed back, the enemy Syrian archers would have had a field day with my general. So my spear horsemen barely alive. They will actually get beat down by these Syrian archers, and I'm running away from these legionary cohorts with my mercenary Thracian Peltis. If I kite them a little bit and maybe get a volley, I might actually be able to destroy these guys, but the mercenary Thracian Peltis here is 65 kills, not bad at all. And some of those kills were a general's bodyguard, by the way, so definitely a unit that's proved itself worth it. And again, units like these noble swords, extremely deadly in the late game, because now the Roman units are not really in any position to be taking charges, and they will get destroyed. So even though my guys are tired and fighting in the woods, it will, dismantle their charge a little, but they're still going to badly beat these Romans down on the charge. And then these Romans over here are going to eventually give way too, because their army is losing. They're losing this fight. And all those things are going to factor in. Plus, I'm about to charge them from behind with heavy spears. These heavy spears have actually performed pretty admirably, and these axe warriors actually perform pretty admirably as well. So this is why I like the Getae. They're a fun faction. They have some interesting units, and they have some definite weaknesses. But I find them enjoyable to use, and just one of those unique factions in Rome too. That Dacia was a very meh kind of faction for me in Rome 1. And so it's kind of cool to see the Getae in this game kind of bring them to life a little bit. Definitely a lot of fun to use this faction. Anyway, hope you all enjoyed this battle. I thought that one was actually really fun. The Roman got more kills than I did. Fortunately, I had more men than he did. But if we take a look, again, these noble swords paying dividends. My general, I'm surprised he got that many kills. But again, the heavy spears, I'm surprised at how well some of these guys perform. But again, if you take the right engagements, sometimes it'll work out okay. Axe warriors doing about the best as be expected against Roman infantry. That's a tough fight for them. But look, 78 kills on these Thracian peltasts. I'm guessing these guys must have gotten hung up by auxiliary cav or something like. No, I think these guys were firing it in the back of Roman infantry and got shot to death by Syrian archers. So not getting the best out of these guys, but this unit definitely proving its value in killing the enemy general, and then also being able to chase Syrian archers in the late game. And you can see the Syrian archers were working on my demise, and they would have accomplished it had I not managed to kill that Roman general, because these guys would not have routed so easy had I not done that. Anyway, hope you all enjoyed that one. So final thoughts about the Getae. I think we've pretty well summed it up here. Fun units, fun faction. Grab the Getae, jump into campaign. It's good times. Same thing in multiplayer battles. Just be aware that their weakness is their limited melee infantry offerings, but they have strengths in missile cav, Thracian peltast, decent performance for the price from these spears, heavy spears and armored spears, but again, don't rely on them necessarily as great mainline infantry, and then the potential for shot cavalry charges. So those are your tools, and obviously those tools can be used appropriately against certain factions, I think, to good effect. And then also, I did not show in this battle the Dacian heavy bowmen, which are also another tool that you should keep in mind, a potentially useful tool. So like if you were going to face a much stronger barbarian faction like the Boii, who don't have particularly good skirmishers, your plan might be to say use Thracian peltast or Dacian heavy bowmen to snipe the enemy Oathsworn general, thus giving your guys a chance later in the fight, but still going to be a tough fight for you. Anyway, hope you all enjoyed it. HeirofCarthage signing off for now.